It is wonderful to be here. I see friendly faces, some of you I've just met, and some of you taught me when I was the age of you students. So it's exciting to be back, and it's an honor to be with you. I follow the life of Christopher Dock with some interest as I read The Lamplighter. I've watched building after building go up, and I've seen the exciting things that you are doing. I want to tell you about something that I did just a few weeks ago on September 21st, when I joined 310,000 other people to march in the People's Climate March in New York City. 200,000 people ahead of me was my friend Rosanna, who's also a Christopher Dock alum. She had taken a bus from Washington, D.C., and she had joined a group called Investors for Climate Action. Many blocks away, I was in the back, toward the back of the line, in a group of scientists and people of faith. Literally thousands of people surrounded me. Our group watched as a group of color-coordinated anarchists for climate change for climate action, not climate change, went walking by. And then there were the communists, and then there were every other group you could imagine. And right next to me was a large group of scientists that came from all over the country to work with a group called Science Speaks, advocating for our leaders to pay attention to the best science out there that says climate change is real, significantly caused by humans, and something we need to pay attention to. But the group I was personally walking with included young evangelicals for climate action with a giant orange sign, and staff members from the Christian Reformed Church Office of Social Justice, and students from 2 Christian colleges, and myself and several other individuals, all of whom were Christians, all of whom had gathered before the march for a prayer meeting, and all of whom were walking together to say, we are Christians, we know about this, and we think action needs to be taken. What a wonderful place to end up, because in my world, I am a scientist, and I'm a person of faith, and I know about ecology, and this is the issue of our day. You are the climate generation. There will never have been a time in your life when people did not know that this was one of the most compelling issues facing the globe. But it's not the only issue facing the globe. In fact, environmental degradation generally is one of the big issues that your generation will pay attention to, much as people in my generation are. Now, one of the cool things was that there were Mennonites in this group. Of course, I couldn't actually meet them because of 310,000 people, that's a lot of people, and I wasn't really able to meet them, but I did read about them. And there were groups marching with Mennonites together in that climate meeting. And the Mennonite Central Committee has a climate action program, and so you guys, you're on the ball. Okay. Now let me ask, what brought that entire group together? Why were they willing to join together, say that this really mattered, and what are they concerned about? Well, I was marching as a scientist because in my career as a scientist, I have watched us go from being less certain to quite certain that this is a real problem facing humanity. And as you've heard, I've also watched the population of the globe increase quite a bit. And those twin pressures mean that right now we have to be paying attention in a way that prior generations did not have to. I will not spend much time talking about what the science of climate change tells us. I feel like we need to get past that question. with your aunt or your parents, and they are not sure about it, let me point you in the direction of something that might be helpful to you. A 2014 report that you can just Google called What We Know, put out by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. That's the largest professional society, scientific professional society in America, summarizes the current best state of the science in friendly language for lay people, and would be probably the best place to look for information right now, although many other places are putting out information. And if you wanted to look at another source, there was a report by the National Academies of Sciences just a couple of years ago called America's Climate Choices. Again, Google it, you can download it for free off the web, and all of these have the long version, and then they've got, if you don't have time for the long version, the summary version. So that's to say, you are ding empowered. Permission Theory says go find out about this from reputable sources, and I will not spend any more time on it. Now, when I read the Bible, I don't see anything that says, and God said, here's what to do about climate change, deforestation, or any other global problem that we see today. Not directly. But it does give us several principles about our dealings with other people and creation. These include loving your neighbor, care of the poor and the oppressed, justice, stewardship of creation, and living out the gospel message. I want to focus on two very briefly, and then talk a little bit specifically about how poverty and climate change interact. But first I want to say, even if environmental degradation didn't do much to humans at all, it would still be a problem. The natural world that you see around us is created by God, is the handiwork of God, and He gave it to our care to take care of. So it is actually true that degradation of that environment harms us terribly in multitudes of ways. But even if that were not true, it would still be our job to stop, take note, and solve the problems we are causing. And that's because what we're doing to the natural world is like walking into the Louvre and spray painting a lot of paintings. The handiwork of God is more beautiful than any art ever created by a human, and yet we treat it as if it was nothing. So that's just me getting real intense for a second there to say, hey, it's not all about humans. God gave us a task in Genesis, saying take care of the garden, tend and care for this, and we're to do that. Nonetheless, in fact, degrading the earth does harm humans tremendously. We are like the servants of the parable of the talents in Matthew 25. We have the natural world in trust for God. John Calvin used the concept of stewardship to describe what we are supposed to do. And he said this, let him who possesses a field so partake of its yearly fruits, that he doesn't suffer the ground to be injured by his negligence. Let him endeavor to hand it down to posterity as he received it, even better cultivated. Let him so feed on its fruits that he doesn't dissipate it by luxury or permit it to be marred by neglect. Let everyone regard himself as a steward of God in all things he possesses. Stewardship doesn't mean the world can never change. We live in a dynamic environment with a climate that has been warmer sometimes and colder sometimes. But the changes that we see today are so rapid, and they come on top of so many other stressors that the effects are difficult for humans to cope with. So let's talk a little bit about what happens with poverty and climate